Alright, real simple. Fork seal changes on the VS700 Suzuki Intruder. You start with the wheel. The wheel comes off with this. It's a big old honkin' hex key. You can get them any hardware store. You back it off after you have taken out the pinch bolt, which is on the front, and you'll need a screwdriver to drive this axle all the way out. Pretty simple. Once it's loose enough, you'll be able to tell. In addition, you will have to remove the brake caliper. It's held on by the two bolts that you can see right there, still on it. And then you can pull the entire assembly off so you have access to the forks. Now, my particular Intruder has the buckhorn pullback bars. I could not get to the top of the fork cap without taking these bars off. And also you have, this is the cable for the speedometer. So place a towel on your tank and then take the buckhorns off, and then you have easy access to this. This unscrews, and unlike a lot of other bikes, this is actually set in, and you can't slide the fork out without taking these caps off first. There will be several smaller pieces of chrome plastic bits to take off, such as here and here. This is the pinch bolt that holds the fork to the bike. You need to remove that to get the fork off. Now, the way to get the seal itself off and to remove this fork leg here, you can either, oh yes, and also on the bottom here, is this bolt. This bolt goes into the bottom here. You need to hold this in place by putting something like this back in the axle, or you can break it open on a vise. I don't have a vise, so I have to do it on the bike. That's the easy way to do it, but you need to use then something like this piece here, because it's an Allen based bolt, or you can use that very long one there as well. Now, you need to remove the dust cover with a tiny little screwdriver, such as this. There will be a circlip underneath this dust cover, and once that is removed, you just slam this down like that, and it'll drive the fork seal up, and it'll separate those pieces. Now then, this is the dust cover. This is the little circlip held on. Tuck that onto the dust cover because we're going to pull the leg down. Actually, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't take a lot of force, but it may take several attempts. And there it was. It took one hand. There it was. It just took one hand to pull the lower fork leg right off. Maybe 10 strikes. But you have your old seal. There is a washer. There is a bushing. Actually, there's two. Now, an important thing about these bushings, see where this gap is. These should actually be, and there's another one here behind it. They should actually be opposite each other when you go and put all this back together, because I forget why it somehow enables things to not leak more or something of that nature. So they come off. These will actually come off as you work on things and clean them up. You're going to need to slide them up, not down, because this bushing, you really don't want to pull that out unless you have new bushings to replace it with, because they stretch and get weird and bad things happen. Alright. Things of note. This is a 27mm bolt. on the top of this thing, and it's not a cover, that's really it. But it's soft metal, you need to be careful. All I have is this giant socket that also fits the back on the axle of the Intruder and also the VTX. Now here is what your fork assembly looks like when it's dismantled. You have in the lower fork, this piece here is actually what attaches to the bolt at the bottom when you were to drain the fork oil. And then you have, going into this tube here, this bushing, then this washer, then you have this is the seal, circlip, and over top of that is the dust cover. Inside of here is this, which goes down through this piece that sits in here when it's inside the leg here. Then this spring, then this washer, and then this, I don't know what they call it, spacer of some kind. All of these pieces here fit inside the upper fork leg. These go on the outside of the upper fork leg, and this goes inside the lower fork leg. Now, once you've gotten this all apart, assembly is the reverse. Again, like I pointed out all the pieces. The only real problem is getting these fork caps back on. You may need assistance, but I would bolt this. There's a pinch bolt here. Attach that to the bike. Maybe not all the way, or slide this up more. And then you need to put pressure here while turning. You may need someone to pull down on the lower fork assembly as you are doing this to extend everything out. So this is at its max extension. There'll be a spring in here putting a lot of pressure on things. So a second hand helps a lot while you are up here grunting and straining to put this on, because it wants to not seat correctly and it wants to strip threads very easily. But that's really all there is to it. It's a 2-hour job, maybe if you've done it the first time, maybe an hour. Most of it's just involved of cleaning. So that's all there is to putting this particular bike back together. So a couple tips here. This bolt goes at the end here. You really need a tool like this. And it can be, this is pretty simple. It's got, you can pop these up, so it's just a regular socket bit. But even a dedicated T-handle set, you need to get to this and really snap it hard, just once, to help it release, because otherwise it just sits and spins inside this shaft here. So you need to crack it as best you can, and if it means pulling this stuff out into a vise, that's what you gotta do. Next tip. When it comes to this seal, which actually faces up this way in this case, when this is on, you need to drive it back in place. And if you don't have a really expensive seal driver and you don't want to mess around with PVC, got another tip. Wrap this, after you've slid this back down, wrap electrical tape around here until it's about the thickness of this. You have to do it twice and pull it off. Once to drive on this and also the other bushing in place. And once those are in place, then you can drive the seal on, and make sure you use this old seal on top of the new seal. And with the tape wrapped around, you just, as you did when you were taking this off where you slid the tube up, instead you slide it down and it acts just like the seal driver, but you know, $4 worth of electrical tape versus $120 for an adjustable seal driver set. Just little tips to help you get through this job without having to buy a bunch of once-use only tools. Final thoughts, tips, and concerns here. So when you have put this all back together, mount it on the motorcycle, and then you fill it with fork oil. I've heard ATF can be used, however, I don't know. I've also heard it's not sufficient when this bike calls for 15 weight oil from the manual. Manual's easy to find, and it also only takes 12 ounces of fluid, and there is 16 in this container, so you will have to pour out 4 ounces into a separate container and store it for later use, whatever. So each fork equally gets 12 ounces. When it comes to the actual fork tube, the inner tube, this is ultra fine steel wool. It is quad 4. Right there. 4 zeros. This is the stuff you're looking for. Take a little bit of metal polish on the inner leg to help get rid of some of the leftover oxidation and rust. Also, when you're putting on the new seal, cut up a soda bottle, a plastic soda bottle. You wrap it on the inside of here, and you use that to force it down the inner leg here so that you don't scratch the inside of this surface. So you would slide this all the way down until it's in position, and it's a little cocooned piece of cut up plastic soda bottle. That's all the tips that I have as far as getting through this job. It's not horrific. It's not something that should be overly daunting. It just needs to be done, and it's easily enough done at home. So until next time, Internet's later days.